Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lost in Translation show, where we explore the past to help people understand what's happening to mankind today. This is Simone, your host. Our topics today will be understanding weaponized weather, the unusual anomalies of the recent fires in California, and then our guest will offer some suggestions on how people can take back power from the corrupt political system. For those of you listening to this interview on YouTube, please go over to my Rumble channel at Lost in Translation Show. That's one word, because some of the content I'm going to be uploading over the next few months may not be YouTube friendly, and I don't want to use contact with my subscribers. So please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to give you a little introduction about who Matt is. His name is Matt Dakin. He's a truth seeker and whistleblower who is working to wake people up to the globalist agenda to depopulate and control all aspects of our lives. He emphasizes hardening up, becoming self-reliant, and networking with other like-minded people to set up strategic alternative systems as the globalists attempt to lock the people who will not go along with their agenda out of society. Matt has over 33 years experience in the fire service, including 20 years as a captain and as a paramedic. In 2018, he investigated the Camp Fire in Paradise, California, and exposed many anomalies that were not natural with the behavior of most fires. Matt is working to reach as many people as possible to show them the larger agenda and to give them the tools to become more independent, self-reliant, and uncensored from our corrupt control system. Wow, that sounds like a heavy responsibility, Matt. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Unensnared is what I meant to be unensnared from this current system. Thank you, Simone,
Okay.
for having me.
I kind of gave people a little background on you. Do you want to add anything in the bio?
Um, no, I'm just a normal guy for the most part, other than I've taken the red pill, and I want what everybody else wants. I never planned to be spending my time doing this type of thing at this time in my life. But I think it's really, really important. There is a war that is going on right now. It is a silent but extremely deadly, probably the most deadly war that's ever gone on. And most people, or a majority of people, are unaware of it. And so I think it's really, really important that this information gets out, because if people are unaware that they're being attacked, then with any problem, the first thing is to recognize the problem before you can do anything else. And so I'm just trying to alert people that, hey, this is going on. If they don't want to heed this warning, that's up to them. But I want to get people, because it is silent war, and it's by deception in so many ways.
Well, thank you for coming and sharing with us today. I think a lot of people's minds are open because we understand that so many unusual things have occurred. I understand uh, that you like to talk a little bit about weaponized weather and the purpose of weaponized weather. Maybe we should start there.
Yes, yeah. So the controlling the weather, and I don't remember who said it, but they talked about it for a long time. The quote, we'll just call them globalists, people that are actually really running the world, have talked about, controlling the weather and controlling the people. And the NASA had a document, NASA war document, came out back decades ago, and it's talked about controlling the weather by 2025. Well, they're ahead of schedule. They've been controlling the weather for a long time. And you can go back and you can look up Operation Popeye, which was used in the late 60s in the Vietnam War, where they flooded out the Ho Chi Minh Trail using cloud seeding. And okay, so that was almost 60 years ago, 55 years ago, whatever. They were using these technologies. Have you ever heard them talk about using those technologies to combat any of these fires, any of these terrible fire conditions we have? Never. I've never heard them. You won't hear them talk about that. They'll use the term climate change. Climate change, everything is climate change. Again, it's where they don't talk about everything they're doing, the geoengineering that is going on. Um, it's commonly referred to as weather modification. I like to call it weather weaponization or terrorism, but regardless, you can look this up. you can look this up. There's a website that's easy accessible to find this information out. And that's Dane Wigington's website at geoengineeringwatch.org, just like it sounds, geoengineeringwatch.org. You click on that, and right at the top of the page, you'll see there'll be a list of terms, and one of them is patents. And you click on patents, and you'll see well over 100, maybe a couple hundred patents going back into the late 1800s for controlling and modifying the weather. And so I think that's a great place for people to start. This is a lot of private corporation. This is military, and it's also the governments that are involved in this. So, and most of it is pretty, a lot of it is very secretive. So you really can't know what's going on. There's been a lot of information that's come out lately. There was just an article the other day I read about a pilot for Lufthansa that actually was got fired because he was part of his job was to drop spray on his route some areas, and he wasn't doing that. He stopped doing it, and they found out, and I guess it was costing the whatever corporation was millions of dollars for him not doing that. And there's a lot of people that have woken up to what's going on. When you look up in the sky, I mean, it looks like you could play tic-tac-toe a lot, just that's just one aspect of it is the spraying chemicals. And what they're spraying, it's been proven, that there's the ice, the snowpack, I'm sorry, off of Mount Shasta has been measured before, and the aluminum is off the charts in a form that doesn't exist naturally. How does it get there? It can only get there from being sprayed. So some of the three common materials that have been sprayed over the years: aluminum, barium, strontium. But there's a lot of other things and the nanoparticles of things that are being sprayed. And again, we're not being told, we're being guinea pigs. So so that's one aspect of it. I don't want to just ramble on. You want me to go into other parts of weather control?
Well, I had read since the 1920s they've actually been using on the weather manipulation on us. I was also in Venezuela, and I believe that they've used this during wartime many times, including in Iraq and Iran. And a
Yeah.
personal experience I had is I was in Venezuela for a wedding in the year 2000. And many people in the West don't remember this, but people in South America do. Over 50,000 people died in torrential rains when the entire city was flooded. It was 3 days before the presidential election that brought the Communist Party into Venezuela, and hence another 25 years of starvation and depletion of their country's assets. So I had personal experience. They've never had a flood like that since. It caused total disruption in the voting, and they are also the ones who originally used the Dominion voting system and the technology that goes with Dominion. So that would just be a recent example. Are you familiar with that flood in Venezuela a few years ago?
I'm not, but there have been so many attacks. And if you look at some of the states, that are the red states versus the blue states, like Texas, been attacked, or they've had. We'll just say it. They've had some of the worst weather, the hailstorms and the freeze they had in Texas, and the hurricanes in Florida. So again, this for the controllers to use weather as a weapon or as a tool, it gives them plausible deniability. So if we look at what's happened recently up in North Carolina, again, mostly conservative areas were hit. Gives plausible deniability. Was that just that most people will think it was all just an act of nature? And can I prove it wasn't? I can't prove anything with what I have right now, but I can prove these are technologies that exist, and there's people that have better access that can see a lot of what's going on. When we have HARP technology, we have NexRad, we have these other technologies where, HARP has been around for a long time. That stands for, it's an acronym, HAARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project. And what that does is that heats up the ionosphere, and then when you heat up the ionosphere, you can make high pressure zones, low pressure zones. You can use these technologies to actually steer hurricanes. You can create hurricanes, steer hurricanes, terminate hurricanes. So these are technologies that they have that why would we think they're not being used when they're patented technologies? So and every type of weather event that you can think of, there are patents for that can be looked up. Um, and so a lot of these have to do with frequency, like such as earthquakes. And then the reasons, I can start giving you many reasons why, of the purpose, if you were at the levers of this, why it would be beneficial for you, because there's a lot of benefits in doing this for certain elite groups. And would you like me to start with that, going down there?
Well, this is an interesting little fact about North Carolina. I've got two different things. The A lot of people believe that the longshoremen's protest that was happening, the Teamsters strike a few years ago, was really a cover for the non-corporation government to come back in and reactivate the U.S. military. There's a base in North Carolina, a Marine base that was reopened because the Marines and the Navy will be in charge of changing the assets. I'm trying to look this up, but usually the contracts were signed with the International Teamsters Union, but the new contract was signed with the USMCA, which is the People's Trust. So there was that base that was being reopened there. And there was also BlackRock purchased the company that owns the lithium mines the month before.
Yep.
And anyone who knows anything about mining, this lithium deposit this is my specialty. The lithium deposit is in a populated area. It's a poor populated area. So it's a lot harder to get permits and that kind of thing. But the interesting part about it is, guess who one of the primary shareholders is of the mining company that BlackRock just purchased?
Isn't it Kamala Harris's husband?
Yes, it is.
Yes, I read that.
So these things just don't make sense when you start getting into it. I've covered Kamala Harris and her family history on the recent interviews I've been doing. And through a company called the Macquarie Group, her and her husband have been making millions of dollars outside the Iran embargoes, all of the countries that have embargoes against the US. And this is what embargoes basically do. They drive up prices, they create shortages for the average person in the countries that we're attacking, and they usually double the prices of anything for people here in the United States. So with them selling, they're making millions of dollars. And you know who else is on the board and a large investor of that company? The head of the Iran intelligence. So the Macquarie Group, again, is owned by Vanguard, that's owned by BlackRock, and they are there stirring it up for their own benefit.
Yeah, from what I've seen, when nature works in it has a flow to it. It has if you have, it doesn't go from year after year, you have these are your average temperatures, and it gets in this area, it gets up to 100 degrees. And then the next year, it doesn't usually go like to 120 degrees or something that drastic. And what we've seen with the weather is so drastic from what's ever been. And even like clouds don't form perfect squares. Clouds everything has a flow. Nature has a flow. It's not rigid squares. And so when you look up and you see the checkerboard in the sky, it's obvious that those aren't natural. Those are grids that are man-made grids. Well, the weather, the same thing. When it's off the charts, when you have 30 something inches in 18 hours, and it's never done anything like that. I mean, how many 1 in 1,000 years floods do you have? And and they keep pushing this climate change. That's what it is. And I say, look at the patents, start studying them. And do you still think it's climate change when you start looking at all the technologies that exist and what they can do with these technologies? And are we to think that somebody's gone to all the trouble to create these technologies, to create these abilities, to patent them, and they're not using them, they're never going to use them? Is that what we think, that they're there, they're on the books, they're patented, but they're not being used? Is that what we're supposed to think while these extreme events are going on? So to me, it's obvious. It's obvious what's going on. And I think anybody that starts doing the research, it'll be obvious to them what's going on.
Are you aware of the Club of Rome documents in 1967, 1968, where they planned to build a world military? And their plan for that is because they couldn't get people to consent to this world tax because they need to tax everybody to support their system. So if you go to the Club of Rome meeting minutes in 67 and 68, they discuss creating what you were just talking about and how they were going to implement it and how it would lead to the United Nations complete control of the planet via unelected officials and legislation and private corporations and forcing the tax. They've been trying to force this tax on countries. That's what we've got, the carbon tax. We have it in small ways right now, and it's a total scam. I mean,
Yep.
our bodies are 90% carbon.
Yep.
Why do we want to take the carbon out of the air? It doesn't make any sense.
It's a tax on
Comments
life.
on that?
Yeah, 100% agreed. It's a tax on life. It's crazy. It's crazy. And CO2, going after CO2, like that's a bad thing. It's everything, it's upside down world. And um unfortunately they have control of the school system and the colleges and universities too. So that's another big part of the problem, is people are not thinking for themselves. They're not being taught to think.
Well, and
So
I live in an area where we've got a mixture of, different people, like organic farmers, regular farmers. And I noticed that it's almost traumatized a lot of people, that they're worried about the climate. People who are caring, good people, it's gotten into their minds. You see like 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds having stomach aches because they've been torturing them at school and telling them the world's going to end and this and that. I mean, it's really emotional trauma. And I've noticed, besides Trump derangement syndrome, the other one is the environmental derangement syndrome. And I want a beautiful environment. I'm a naturalist. I live in the country. I live on a farm. I grow my food organically. But a lot of people just don't understand the impact. They have different ways of getting, like with the right, it might be gun control. And then with the left, maybe it's the technology and the global warming thing. So people have different that the people who control the world have different ways of getting in our minds. And this is really one of the prominent ones, I think, over the last 75 years, that they've definitely made a pathway into people's brains. And it's going to be super hard to change people back because they say on science, which pretty much anything they say is science usually isn't science.
yeah, mind control to me is a huge subject, and it's vast, and keeping people in a fear state is definitely one of their major objectives, because when you're in a fear state, you close down. You're not creative. We by nature are curious. We like to explore and invent and try things, and that's when we're open and we're not afraid. But when we're in a state of fear, we close down and we become great slaves when we're closed down. And that's what they've done in so many different ways. And even the mind control, like I said, it's so vast. If you just look, we're spiritual beings. We're having this physical experience, but we're actually at the core, we're spiritual beings. And you look at what does fluoride do? Oh, it calcifies the pineal gland. What's a pineal gland? It creates melatonin, the spirit gland. That's the connection that we have with our higher selves and higher creator, however you want to look at it. That is very important. And there's been a concerted effort, in my opinion, it's obvious, to keep us looking at the low-hanging fruit in this artificial world, in this 3D existence, and they don't want us having that higher level of consciousness, that spiritual awareness. They don't want that. Again, that's another, in my opinion, another part of the mind control that goes on, which is a vast subject in itself.
Well,
But
you'll notice a lot of people who do have a spiritual connection, eyes are being opened right now, regardless of what religion you belong to or what political party you belong to. I believe this is a spiritual battle that we're in. These people openly worship Satan. You can go to the United Nations, they worship Lucifer. There's a sign right on the front. If you don't serve Lucifer, don't bother coming in, basically. The United Nations was founded on the Lucifer Trust. So these aren't far-fetched ideas. It's just that people's mind haven't been able to get around the different concepts. So I know we have a lot of issues with weaponized weather. It's probably something that we're going to solve today. But is there any way that we can prepare against these attacks or start getting the chemicals and stuff out of our bodies?
yes, yes, definitely. So the first thing you want to do is you really want to look at, everyone has their own situation of where they're living. And so if you're living under a lithium deposit right now or some rare metal deposit, you might be concerned that they're coming after you with weather to get you off your property. But look at where you are and look at one of the things with the weather modification, whatever you want to call it, what they're doing is, I also believe they're not going to, California is not going to be hit by any weather modification that's going to help fires in January or February. They're going to enhance the normal cycles, the hydrological cycles in the season. So if it's hurricane season, that's when, if they're going to enhance a hurricane or steer it or modify it or increase it, that's when it's going to happen. And the same with fire season, same with hailstorms, whatever. So that they can enhance whatever the season is, whatever the time is. So wherever you are, recognize what your vulnerabilities are. Your house, where do you live? Are you on some land? How self-sufficient are you? Self-sufficiency and self-reliance is so important. You're not going to be able to rely on the government in any time of need for who knows how long, depending on how big the disaster is. You have to be self-reliant. Then you want to have your own extra water, extra food, extra any medical supplies or medications you might need. You want to make sure you're good with that. Make sure that your house is hardened up. So if you you don't want to be the pig that built the straw house when you got the storm coming. You want to have a place that is going to withstand whatever type of weather that is going to be coming your way. And then get to know your neighbors, get to know them, get to know who they are, the better relationship you have with your neighbors. And if you can get them to be of like mind, you don't want to be the only house on the block that has these provisions, because everyone else is going to become knocking at your door when you're the only house with the lights on when everything goes out, and they're going to be coming knocking on your door. So the more you can get to know your neighbors, become friends with your neighbors, and get them on board as much as possible, the better off you'll all be. And then you can also share resources. So these are some basic things that I think are really important. And you may find that where you are is not safe in the long run and in the long haul, and you might want to move to somewhere, a better location potentially. And if you don't have the ability to have the water supply that you want, you can get one of those camping filters, those water filters, and you can find water anywhere and you can filter it, and then you'll have water. So you don't need to spend a whole lot of money for water and food. There's plenty of places where you can get 30-day supply, or whatever. So, and then start working on becoming more self-reliant as a way of life, because ultimately everything's about control, and there's going to be more and more control of our lives in all aspects. So the more that we can all do to become self-reliant, the better off we're going to be.
Well, it's strange that you mentioned if you live in a certain area. I think we're primary examples, like the people in North Carolina have the lithium deposit under them. We have 85% of the gold left from the gold rush still sitting here in California. Where is it predominantly? Under the federal parks. The federal government, a private corporations, owns 25% of our country. Most of our gold reserves and our mineral reserves are located in those federal parks. So I believe that a lot of the fires that were related to this were exactly as you were saying, they were to remove us from the property. They also immediately harvested all the timber that was left. And for people who don't understand the Paradise Fire, I'm sure you're aware of this. They built the fire camp the month before the fire started.
Yep.
They also had deployed all the lumber trucks. I was actually staying at a campground. I was having some work done on my place. I put my travel trailer down at a campground, and all of a sudden, all of these young, under 30-year-old men started showing up. They took over half the campground, and they were the loggers for the fires that were going to be cleaned up after the fires, but the fires hadn't started yet. So once you realize that they do have these agendas and goals, you can really start seeing what is going on in your own community. And my example for us in Northern California, I know you're going to talk about the anomalies of the fire, is exactly what ended up happening. And we were being burned out. And not only do they want to claim, they want to force us all into the cities under Agenda 2025 and 2030. So this is just an expedited way to get us off the land and away from the assets that they want to mine. The California gold rush increased the world's gold supply by 6% for the first time in 1,000 years. So that's how much gold is here. We've never been allowed to mine it. If California could unharness its resources, we wouldn't have the major financial troubles that we have, and we wouldn't have the highest unemployment rates in the rural areas that we have that are in the double digits right now. And those are government numbers. So you know that they're dramatically higher than that. So the resources are what they want, and they're using the energy weapons and the fires to get to that. Would you agree?
I 100% agree. I 100% agree with that. And I think the first time I knew there was something that wrong was the Tubbs fire. And that was right here in my backyard. And that's where fire started in Calistoga, and it worked its way over through the hills, over into Sonoma County, went across the Highway 101, which is, I don't know, 5 or 6 lane highway, something like that, and burned down a fully sprinklered Kmart building amongst unbelievable devastation. There was a neighborhood called Coffee Park
I
in
know
San
Coffee
Diego.
Park. I have a friend who lived there.
Everything was burned down to nothing. Okay, so and I've done this since 1985. I've been going all over the state fighting fires. When a house burns down, you can go into the house afterwards and you'll see, oh, there's the shell of the refrigerator, of the stove. Oh, there's the countertop still there. I mean, the cabinets might have fallen to the ground, but the countertop's still there. The sink, the metal sink's still there. So you can see, okay, this was the kitchen. Okay, there's the bathroom. There's the toilet. The porcelain toilet's still there. That's the normal fire. This fire, nothing. It was all gone. And so there was nothing normal about it. While many trees were still there. The forest, it forgot to burn the forest on its way. I mean, there were a lot of trees burned, but a lot of trees didn't burn. But every house that it came in contact with burned down to nothing, it was kind of like 9/11, the buildings down to dustification. So that was the first time out of doing this that I kind of realized that something wasn't right. Plus the amount of fires. Yes, it was windy that night, but the amount of fires, there were like over 70 fires within 5 or 6 counties.
Well,
That
I don't know if this happened to you over in Sonoma County, but in June, they sent out a letter in our electric bill that said there was going to be wind in August. Okay, we rarely have wind here. Did they know at a certain day and time in August that they printed there was going to be wind?
Yeah.
So in August, there was wind for 2 hours. You're talking about those fires. They all started immediately around the same time. How did they know? I mean,
Right.
they're just putting it in our face. and
Right.
people are still denying it. And the reality is all those fires started, it burned down millions and millions of uh, value and property and people's livelihoods and wineries and vineyards over in Sonoma County and Napa County. And people, and of course, we haven't had fires like that since.
Yeah, so that was the first one that kind of woke me up. But I was stuck here at my place for over a week, maybe 10 days or something, and knew if I left, because they were planning on burning it through my property. And so it was a very stressful time for me because again, they planned and wanted to burn it through my property. I wouldn't leave, some of my neighbors wouldn't leave. So finally they decided to stop it before it got here. And then that was in 2017. And so I had a lot of emotion in that. And I didn't really go study that or investigate that because I was just trying to clean up my own mess and deal with my own stuff after that. But in 2018 was when the campfire up in Paradise happened, and I just retired. And so a friend of mine, Jamie Lee from A Plain Truth, who has since passed, he was going up there and he called myself and another friend, my buddy John Lord, another retired fire captain, and invited us to go up and investigate with him the fire up there. So we did. And it was unbelievable what we saw. And again, I've been doing this my whole career, and nothing made sense. The fire burned, the heaviest fire was at the ground level, and these tunnels that went into the ground on a tree or a manzanita bush where the leaves didn't burn and it only burned at the base and created tunnel systems where the roots had been, or oak trees, same thing, and hollowed out. I mean, there was a tree that was probably 3.5, 4 foot diameter in the middle of a parking lot in a school that was burned out. There was nothing around it. It burned from the inside out. Multiple things like that. The other thing we saw was there was a vault, electrical vault, and it was actually Deborah Tavera's husband, Lou. So she was with us on this trip. He opened it up, and there was no fire damage to the outside of this electrical vault. He opened it up, and there was a melted smart meter that had fallen to the floor. It could only have happened through the wiring because, like I said, there was no external heat. So, and we saw another smart meter up there, part of a school that didn't burn in the middle of a hallway, which was protected again from any heat. It was melted. So there were I believe there were multiple things that were going on to create the destruction and the fire that was created up there. We'd see many fence posts that were only burned where the metal was attached, such as the wire or the nails or the screws, where the nails or screws were attached. That's where it burned. That's where a lot of the wood stuff burned, where the metal was attached. Any tires with steel belts on were burned completely up. But if you had a tire that didn't have the steel belts in them, that tire might still be there. So if you took a pile of wood chips and put them in the microwave and turn it on for a minute, you may or may not start a fire. I'm not sure, I haven't done it, but I know that if you put a pile of pieces of metal and put them in the microwave and turn them on for a minute, you're going to get much more destructive fire than wood. And that's what it looked like. It looked the damage we saw in the what burned and how it burned. It looked like what you would expect in a microwave oven. Well, if you put stuff in a microwave, we had cars that were completely burned down, just metal frame, everything in them, the glass gone, everything's gone. And 4 or 5 feet away was a plastic garbage can that was still intact, just fine. So it was just surprising, just because of the radiant heat, you would have thought they would have melted. But this was common. This wasn't just one off. This was tree after tree after tree and car after car. There was a trailer park up there in Paradise, which completely burned up, but all the I-beams, they were set on I-beams at the base, and these are heavy metal, and they were completely melted and warped. That takes a tremendous amount of heat to do that, while the forest behind them is all still intact. So these are just some of the things. Let me think. Yeah, I mean, it was It made no sense for any, it was not natural. It was obvious it's not natural. And we took photos and we documented all of this. So
So I've heard a lot about the smart meters living in Southern California because they've got them on everybody's house now, and a lot of they've been trying to discredit. They blow up and cause a fire. Not only are they tracking everything you do in your house, they are literally blowing up and causing fires, and people believe they're there for a nefarious reason. Would you support that with what you found?
100%, like I said, there was these, or these couples smart meters that we saw were not melted from the fire. They were melted for some other reason. So you can make your own conclusion. Was it just a coincidence that a surge too high of a surge of power went through and did it? Is there a weak link and they melt when I can't say exactly, but they melted from some other reason other than the fire. So yes, 100%. I would not I would recommend anybody that has a smart meter to opt out, pay the $10 or $20 or whatever it is a month and opt out, because to me they're dangerous. I've seen with my own eyes what can happen. Another thing I want to mention that and I may have it wrong, but I know there was a quote unquote flu that was going on when we were up there investigating the campfire in Paradise. I think it was the swine flu, but I'm not positive that's what it was that they were saying. And I believe that this was radiation poisoning.
That's what I was just going to say, radiation poisoning. Personally, I think I've been exposed to that myself living in Las Vegas for 8 years. We're
Mhm.
basically an entire state of military bases. And when you're there, you can feel the radiation radiating, as even when you're downtown. I also had the experience in New York City. When I come back from New York City, all of the microwave waves and all of the cellular waves that are going through your body all day long are
Yep.
heating you up.
Yep.
I had some health problems a few years ago, and I directly related to the metals in my body and the radiation exposure because I can go to places in the interior of Canada and spend a month there and be completely fine. As soon as I come back to Los Angeles or San Francisco, my health declines within a month again.
Yeah. And I think that we are all being irradiated or being subjected to harmful EMF radiation on a regular basis, some more than others. And so I think it's really scary. When this fire happened in 2018, I was kind of scratching my head, what the heck happened? And so I started studying about directed energy weapons. And like, oh, okay, this totally makes sense now. This would explain everything I've seen. So that's when I really started studying about directed energy weapons. But the scary part is in studying directed energy weapons, I actually saw a lot more patents with directed energy weapons having to do with mind control. That's the
Yes,
scary.
I've seen those in the CIA files. Are you talking about the mind
These are just
control
patents,
pattern?
government patents. These weren't necessarily the CIA files. These are just government patents. I mean, when we were talking earlier about mind control, it's scary. And I'm sure they're coming out. And this was 6 years ago when I was studying this. So, or five and a half years ago when I was looking into this. So, and I'm sure there's a lot more out today. So it's pretty scary. It's very scary what's out there and what they can do with, you think about Havana syndrome, so what's going on. Or the voice to skull technology, or there was that war in South Africa. Where was it? Rwanda, or where they put the two tribes against each other, the Hutu,
Oh, the
I forget.
Hutu. Yes, yes, the
Yeah,
war.
again, that was supposedly again using these technologies to put them against each other. So it's really scary stuff. And another part about hardening up against that type of technology would be, number one, maybe get a meter, try and figure out what your exposure is from what's there. I mean, from the towers and everything else, and then maybe consider, protecting yourself. We've spent our lives hearing about how deadly lead paint is and how bad it is for you, but lead paint or some sort of shield, to would actually help protect you in your house.
What
So
about
create
like those
almost,
beanies and stuff that you can buy that are supposedly like I thought of buying one to wear when I go into the major cities.
I
That
think
are
anything you do it would be helpful. Anything's helpful, but I think where we spend our time, like where we sleep, it's important to try to have because that's when we're sleeping, that's when our body's recharging itself. I mean, I recommend everybody should be sleeping on a grounding sheet. And I don't if they're not, if they don't know what that is, you look up earthing.com. You can buy them online, you buy them on Amazon, wherever. But I think it's really important that relieves that static charge. But you can do things to actually limit the exposure, limit that signal that's coming in. We're being bombarded all the time, and you can do things to limit that. You just have to be careful because, and they have things you can put over your meters if you do have a smart meter and you can't get rid of it, or you live in an apartment or a condo where you're not going to allow you to get rid of it, or there's things you can do. Make sure your bed is not right next to where on the other side of the smart meter. So there's things you can do to protect yourself, and you want to create almost like a Faraday cage, a place, especially when you're sleeping. You want to have at least some time during the day where your body can rejuvenate without being bombarded with all this. I mean, one thing I do every night is I unplug my Wi-Fi when I go to sleep.
yes. I
I
live
think
off grid, so we don't have a lot of Wi-Fi going through us, but I do live near a military base, so I'm always curious as to whether or not it's about 75 miles away, but with this kind of technology, that's pretty close.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so is there anything we can do to take power back from these people? And we're just kind of contributing to our own enslavement. So I know you have some input on that.
Oh, I have. That's another huge topic. Huge topic. Yes, 100%. So this is where my passion is because I started studying understanding the relationship of who we are and who the government actually is and who they say we are and started really going into this about 4 or 5 years ago. And it's amazing what you find out. I mean, so the government is not what you think it is, and we are identifying ourselves in a way that puts us subservient to our government. I mean, we, the people, as stated in the Declaration of Independence, created government to secure our rights. The Constitution doesn't actually give us any rights. It actually is there to protect our unalienable or inalienable rights. It's to protect those rights that are inalienable. It doesn't give us right. It actually limits what the government can do. And the 14th Amendment was created, I think it was 1868, I believe, when that was created. It created the U.S. citizen. Okay. He who creates owns. So Congress created the 14th Amendment, which created the U.S. citizen. And through deception, most people have been tricked all their lives. Our parents, it goes way back to 1868, been tricked into identifying as 14th Amendment U.S. citizens. And again, with those 14th Amendment U.S. citizens are under Congress, and because they were created by Congress, and they have civil rights. They don't have those unalienable and alienable rights. They don't have those. They have civil rights, what the government tells them they have. They are bound to every code, statute, ordinance, regulation. But we, the people who created the government, are not. We are above the government. So there's this hierarchy. And so we all have a right to self-determination. And we can opt out of that once we understand it. Once we understand what is really going on, once we understand that, oh my God, I've been tricked into this lower status, this lower class status underneath the government is supposed to be our servant. They're there to serve us. They're supposed to be our servants. We're supposed to be above them. And so that's the key, is to learn how to cancel that contract, and which is do it because all contracts are voluntary. They have to be voluntary, otherwise they're not a contract. So we've contracted in unknowingly, thinking U.S. citizen, that means American. No, that means a corporate entity under this corporation that is government, is actually a corporation that's running everything. The United States is not the United States of America. So when you look up the United States, like in Title 18, it is a federal corporation. It says it means a federal corporation. And where you look where it's located in the District of Columbia. What is the District of Columbia? It is a 10-mile square area. Okay, that's it. If you go to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the U.S. Constitution, it talks about the limits of the government, and it says they're limited to that 10-mile square area. Okay, so that everything that is gone happens is limited to that 10-mile square area. So the United States Corporation, which is located in the District of Columbia, we all say we're US citizens and we're under that. We're in that corporate system, but we can get out of it by sending a letter to the United States Secretary of State explaining that we no longer choose, because we have the option to choose to be a 14th Amendment US citizen. We are choosing to be one of the people of the several states with our God-given unalienable rights. And it can be as simple as that. And you get it notarized, you send it in, you have proof, you have a copy. That's it, because everything is contract. Everything that you're dealing with the government is all contract law. It's 100% contract. And they have to have us identify as these entities, as these corporate entities. That's why when you're dealing with the government, they will always have your name in all capital letters, because that's another aspect, whole part of that Justinian deception that Simone talks about in her documentary, is that they can't talk to us in our Christian name, because corporations can only do whether they're corporations or corporate entities. So that is, and it's a much bigger topic than that. There's some resources that you can go to look. I'll give them right now that you can start studying this stuff. One is We the People 2. That's the number 2. We the People, the number 2.us. That's one of them. Has great. It takes you from the very beginning and works your way up with understanding. That's a great website. Another one is educatedinlaw.org. Educatedinlaw.org. And then a third one is the Matrix Docs, spelled DOCS.com. And you can go on there, and there's a lot of great information on that. And there's the guy whose site that is actually has a radio show every morning from 8 to 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you can get on there and they'll walk you through exactly what I was just talking about uncontracting, getting out of this system, because in this system, we are funding our own enslavement. So, the Internal Revenue Service is a foreign corporation based out of Puerto Rico. And in order to be liable for federal income tax, well, you have to have some federal income, like being a federal employee, or you have to have income that comes from that 10-mile square area from DC. Most of our income doesn't come from there, or we have to be residents of that 10-mile square area. That's the deception that they've done to us. So,
well, this is the ancient Roman system that's been used to enslave over 800 countries in the last several thousand years, basically run out of the city of London, which is also a private corporation and not part of England, for people who don't understand that. And it's a Vatican state, and the Vatican owns the Federal Reserve System and the banking systems in the world. So we're not talking about the everyday God-fearing Catholics. We're talking about the Vatican political structure that's enslaved humanity for over 2,000 years.
Yep. Yeah. So that's, I know I said a lot, so you can replay this a bunch of times to get it. Go to those sites that I mentioned, and you'll be well on your way.
Is there any way my listeners can get a hold of you or reach out to you if they wanted to listen to any more of your talks or ask you any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. They can get a hold of me at my email is Matthew Dakin, spelled MatthewDakin at protonmail.com.
All right. So thank you for coming on today, Matt. We are going to do a second episode where we go more into detail about escaping from the system. So if people want to tune in a couple days, I'll post that interview. I thank you for your patience. I'm just learning to be an interviewer and getting used to using my equipment and going live. So please stick with me. As always, this presentation is made in hopes that never again will the truth be lost in translation. Please do your own research and come to your own conclusions. Thank you for listening. This is Simone. signing off for today.
Thank you, Simone.
Here I am signing off.